Tonight you've heard an athlete talk about her past experience and a legal expert share her thoughts on a present-day societal dilemma. Now our final speaker will help us look to the future, addressing some of the biotechnical advances that will force us to reconsider the questions. What is fair? What is ethical? I would like to introduce Dr. Robert Klitzman, our research faculty member. Dr. Klitzman is professor of psychiatry at the College of Physicians and Surgeons and at the Mailman School of Public Health here at Columbia University. He serves as the academic director for our Master of Science program in Bioethics at the School of Professional Studies. Dr. Klitzman is highly proficient in writing. He's the author of over 120 scientific journal articles and 8 books. He is the co-founder and former co-director of the Columbia University Center for Bioethics and a former director of the Ethics and Policy Core of the HIV Center. He has received numerous awards for his work, including fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the Russell Sage Foundation, the Commonwealth Fund, the Aaron Diamond Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation. His talk tonight focuses on bioethical issues in sport, especially on the future trends that make this a complex topic for exciting debate. Please help me welcome Dr. Robert Klitzman.
Thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be here with what was such a wonderful group of fellow panelists and speakers. Sports date back thousands of years, as Dean Wingard said, in cultures all over the world. Over 2,500 years ago, the ancient Greeks held the Olympics. Thousands of years ago, the ancestors of the Incas and the Aztecs held organized games as well, in which the losers would often be put to death. But in recent decades, as we've just heard, sports are changing in several ways. First, ever more money is involved due to wide world television rights, growing sports channels, merchandising, promotions, as we've heard. In addition, though, we've been undergoing a rapidly increasing revolution in biological science, with advances in understandings and use of genetics, drugs, hormones, brain scans, and other technologies. Athletes and owners of sports teams have been using these new technologies in various ways, but in the process, they're raising profound bioethical challenges and questions that are important to consider. Athletes in sports, from gymnastics to football to middle school and high school sports to college and professional teams, often unfortunately have traumatic brain injuries, particularly in sports like football. But for decades, these injuries have been largely ignored or dismissed. But growing research using ever more sophisticated neurological exams show that these traumas can in fact cause permanent, long-lasting brain damage that can impair athletes' abilities to think and function. Still, team owners and others who are making lots of money off these athletes often have conflicts of interests in addressing these problems and have minimized or dismissed these risks. We need to reduce these dangers, increase awareness of them, and have athletes be as aware as possible of these risks when they play so they can make informed decisions. They may decide to play anyway, but they at least need to know what the risks are. In recent decades, scientists have also been able to isolate, prescribe, and measure steroids or hormones in the body. Now, our bodies all make small amounts of these chemicals naturally. You all have them right now as you're sitting here. But athletes and Olympic team directors wanting to win have often found ways to use and monitor these drugs in ways that can avoid routine detection. Again, they have conflicts of interest, agreeing to play by the rules, which may ban these substances, but wanting to win. Yet this issue is not always black and white. We must make decisions about which substances to ban. Many of us, for instance, use caffeine as an artificial stimulant. We drink coffee. But we don't consider it to be cheating when we take an exam. It's available to everyone, it's low risk, and it's not clear how much it may actually help. The rules also say it's okay to drink coffee before an exam, Lord knows. Moreover, different sports monitor and enforce the various bans they have about drug use, for instance, and hormone use, and punish violations to different degrees that they each must decide. And of course, they vary. Genetics is also changing many aspects of sports, and will be more in the future. In the 1950s, Watson and Crick discovered DNA and the genetic code that creates all life, from us to plants to other animals. And genetics has several implications for sports. Recently, scientists, for instance, have discovered genes that may predispose to success in different kinds of sports. One gene, for instance, a form of actinine known as ACTN3, has 3 forms. One form makes explosive, powerful muscle contractions and can help with sprinting and jumping and throwing. Another form is slower and can help with endurance. The fast form is found in around 30% of the population. 30% of you have it. But it's in 50% of Olympic and other elite sprinters and jumpers, and only in 25% of endurance athletes. The slow form is found in about 20% of the population. About 20% of us have it, but it's in less than 10% of sprinters, if that. But it's about over a third of endurance athletes. So the percentages vary on the kind of sports. And this has been found across different studies looking at different ethnicities and genders. So these genes clearly have some effect. But companies are now offering genetic tests that can tell you or your children which variant you have. And that may therefore suggest what sport you should do. Some parents have in fact tested their children to decide whether little Johnny, for instance, should pursue one kind of sport or another. But problems arise because little Johnny may not want to be a sprinter, even though he has the gene that might give him an advantage, or he may lack the gene that helps sprinters, but nonetheless still want to be a sprinter. And his parents or coaches may tell him, don't even bother trying. Other people have this gene that's going to help them more. So these genes pose challenges, and they're not always easily interpreted. It's not clear how to interpret them in our everyday lives. Another area concerns tensions between biological and social definitions of sex and gender. It turns out that about 1 in 2,000 people are not born 100% male or 100% female, but are biologically in between. Now, this is not about being gay or straight. This is about being biologically a male or biologically a female. But questions arise. Should they be excluded from sports in which there's a male team or a female team? Or which team should they be on? How should they be categorized? You could say, well, they shouldn't be on any team, but that's unfair, of course. So here too, debates have ensued. And I should say that in bioethics there are certain basic principles. One is respect for persons and autonomy, letting people decide what they want to do, whether it's play in a team or whether it's to protest what the country's doing in various ways. We also look at risks and benefits, and we look at social justice. And all of these issues come into play on these various bioethical questions we now have. Other people may be transgendered and face similar issues about what team to play on. Recent breakthroughs concerning genes and stem cells also now let scientists clone animals, and polo players, for instance, are often cloning their winning ponies. The Argentinian Adolfo Cambioso, for instance, who some consider to be the greatest polo player ever, clones the horses that he rides. He'll have 6 horses, all clones that he uses in a particular game. Again, ethical questions emerge. Cloning, it turns out, usually fails. Many horses have to become pregnant with cloned embryos to produce one live pony. And it turns out that 75% of the ponies born will have serious medical problems and probably die early in order to get the one healthy clone. So to produce one healthy clone, many horses have to undergo pain and suffering and death. For many people, that's an unnecessary waste of animals' lives. Moreover, it turns out that our genes are only one of several factors that shape us. Our environment, both the environment inside the womb and the environment that we face every day, environmental exposures we have, our diet, our mother's diet, can all affect whether and how certain genes are expressed. So a cloned horse is not necessarily the original. That's why even human twins, for instance, do not share all their traits, but can have different personalities, temperament, interests, diseases, etc. In addition, clones of winning horses now sell for close to $1 million. Only very wealthy players can afford this. Now, that creates more of an unequal playing field, of course, and you can argue that the wealthy already dominate polo as a sport, so it's no big deal. But these technologies will already make it even more of a sport for the super rich of the super rich. So the sport as a whole, and sporting associations in polo have to decide, do they want to keep that being the case? Do they want their sport to become even more a sport of the rich, or do they want to make it more open? So again, advances in biology are posing ever new bioethical questions. Now, these questions are not always easily answered, but they require us to think carefully about the issues involved, about the rights of people, about what the risks are, what the benefits are, how to have a just world. And it's important that we think about how best to address these questions as we move ever further into the future and into a brave new world. Thank you.